the 29th of November. So if I go through them, they start on page...
Sorry, Leader. I think we might have declarations of interest.
Right, declarations of interest first. Yeah, Amity, first time. Linda?
Yes, I think you've got 3 reports that are all linked to secondary school education. They're items 8, 9 and 10. And on that basis, I think those of you that are council-appointed governors for secondary schools would need to declare just a personal interest. From memory, I think it's Councillor Clark at Crossy-Ceiliog, Councillor Daniels at Cwmbran High, and you, Councillor Wellington. And Councillor Cunningham, you've also got St Albans as well. If you're all agreed, I think that might be it. Thanks, Leader. Thank you.
All those interests declared. Thank you, Linda. So right, on to the Cabinet Minutes of the 29th of November then. Starting on page 3. If we go through first, we can go through for accuracy any matters arising. So page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. And then 7. 8, 9 and 10. Are we all happy to move those as a true and accurate record? Yep. Right, that's great. And then the Cabinet Minutes of the meeting on the 12th of December, which start on page 11. And page 12. And page 13. And 14. Is everyone happy to move those a true and accurate record? Right, so if we move on to item 6, which is the update on the actions. The action sheet starts on page 15. Chief Executive, anything to add there?
They're there for members' information unless any members have any questions.
Any questions on those? No, we can move straight on to item 7 then, which is the budget and medium-term financial plan. So over to Nigel.
Sorry, Councillor Yole, I know you wanted okay, thank you, Leader, thank you, members. This is a budget position statement which takes the budget forward. I'll come back to the key messages at the end. Section 4 takes us through where we are at the moment from through the provisional settlement. If members remember, there was a gap of 1.1 million the last time we considered the budget, and paragraph 4.1 indicates that we've closed that now, mainly with pressures being taken away or managed, and only a small amount of additional mitigations. 4.2, 4.3, just way of background. All the detail was in the November report, but basically that's saying that we passported through a number of transfers from the settlement. We recognise a number of medium-term financial plan pressures, and we had a range of service uplifts. 4.4 reminds members that when we did the 16-17 budget, we had 2 years of an operating model assessment saving. We've made the first one in 16-17. We originally planned for the second one to be 17-18, but we've moved that forward into the next medium-term financial planning cycle to allow the organisation time to settle after the last one, and importantly, so it's part of a wider and deeper and broader transformation programme. The next part of that section talks you through the final settlement, which was marginally better again. 2 areas really. The first one is some resource that was badged within the final settlement as preventing homelessness, but effectively really it's giving us money to address a pressure created by the way the DWP have changed their subsidy rules. The other element, 116,000, will be down to council tax base and how that has, how ours has changed relative to Wales. So we gained slightly on that, and this report has added that to the money available for policy choice for members. There's some commentary that the final settlement doesn't contain much additional information in regard to individual grant allocations, and then in 4.6 reference to 2 additional sums of money that are going to be sitting outside the settlement for 17-18, but certainly in the first one in relation to social care coming into the settlement from 18-19. And in relation to the social care one, we think it's going to be around things like the living wage and the impact on that, which of course our budget provides for. So that should allow social care and housing some extra financial support. 4.7 then tells us where we are in terms of the unallocated. So there's still 500,000 to support prevention and early intervention. The policy choice has now gone up to 616,000, but the financial resilience has fallen now to 421, and that's, that happens as we start to balance the budget and reconcile the budget. The next paragraph takes us on to the policy choice and refers to the fact that most of our proposals are around schools and social care. Therefore, there's a focus around greener and cleaner in the next iteration of policy choice, together with highways infrastructure, and then makes the point about the moratorium on the proposed library saving and the rationale and what policy development forum agreed on that, and makes the point that, subject to whatever joint scrutiny says next week, that you're not likely to be taking this forward as part of the proposed savings in this budget round when they go to Council at the end of February. The next part is about the Joint Scrutiny Committee meeting, which is next week. And unlike last year, when we had rafts of mitigations for joint scrutiny to go through, in large part all of those have been agreed over a 2-year period. Health here have already reviewed the alternative mitigations in relation to social care, so therefore they're going to be really scrutinising the budget direction of the Council this time. So there will be stuff about the additional and new mitigations, but they will be looking at the service uplifts and your recommendations around policy choice, which will then feed their way through to Cabinet on the 14th and then Council on the 28th of February. There's a section there on capital which captures just where we are and includes things such as the British and 21st century schools. And then the last part, just recognising we've still got an issue around renewal areas, where Welsh Government have taken away the funding for renewal areas, which is around £500,000, and that's still an issue we've got to resolve as we conclude the budget. The next part of the report is on the medium-term financial plan, and we've updated that. There's some pressure now in relation to this is the year of the actuarial review. We won't see any pressure for 17-18, but we're going to see pressure on employers' contributions for the remaining years of the MTFP, so it recognises that. We're plumping now for a 2% reduction in Welsh Government funding as a worst-case position. And building that in, so you've got a revised medium-term gap over the 4 years following the 17-18 of 16.2 million. So that does sort of emphasise the Cabinet Secretary's point that you need to use the current budget with an eye on the future as well, because their settlements are going to get tighter and the challenges don't diminish. In terms of next steps, I referred to the joint meeting of all the Council Review and Scrutiny Committees next week, the 26th of January. We'll have the Council Tax Reduction Scheme, which will be approved on the 31st of January. Your last consideration will be Cabinet on the 14th, and then Budget Council on the 28th of February. And that's largely the report, Leader.
Okay, thank you for the report, Nigel, and also thank you to yourself, Dave, and the officers for their work on this report and on the wider budget. The calm and very thorough way that we approach our budgets in this council, I think, is a credit to you and the work you do, both in terms of the management of the council's finances and in terms of the clear and regular way that you report both to Cabinet and Council on that. And I think that's something that members appreciate. As you said, we welcome that the settlement is less of a cut than expected. but I think we should very much put it in that context, really. Things are still very difficult, but we have to appreciate the efforts that the Welsh Government have made to try and maintain local services working with us. I think the contrast is clear for all to see with the situation in England, where you're seeing the impact of the crisis in social care really hitting home on the NHS in particular, and on some of the most vulnerable people across England. That's the result, I believe, of a government, of the UK government, that doesn't value local services and doesn't step in to protect the vulnerable. I'm glad that at least in Wales that we can work together with the Welsh Government as best we can, albeit that times are difficult, that we can try and work together to maintain local services and to try and protect the most vulnerable people in our communities. Of course, things are still tough looking at the medium term, thanks to the continuation of austerity. I think the Minister has been quite clear in his warnings about the medium term and about the need to plan prudently and in view of tough times to come. The end of the tunnel seems to be continually extended as review after review goes by on a UK level, so we have to very much make decisions with that borne in mind. And I think it's important to say that because some of the more positive choices that we can make today and in the coming months are only possible because of the financial prudence and discipline that we've shown in this Council. So moving on to some of those decisions, I think the recommendation in terms of what we're going to propose to Scrutiny Committee and to Council with regards to libraries is the right one. I think it's right that we've listened to the concerns of the public, to the concerns of our staff and trade unions, both about the potential staffing implications of the changes and to the voice from the community that said how much the library service is valued. I think that can only come about because of the financial discipline elsewhere in the organisation, but that does give us a chance to take a step back and listen, to form maybe a wider local strategy about how libraries can operate in Torfaen and how they can help with our corporate plan priorities and help service the public. So I welcome that, and I think that's something that shows as a council that we can listen where people have valid concerns. I would thank the officers that put forward the proposals for that. I think they did a good job in trying to save money whilst maintaining libraries open. We don't want to close libraries, and whilst maintaining the operating hours of libraries. But I think it's right that at this point we take a step back to look at that wider strategy and to listen to the points that have been made as part of that consultation. Looking at the budget as a whole as well, I think it's right that we very much direct it towards our corporate plan priorities, schools, which we've safeguarded from many of the cuts, vulnerable people and social care in particular, where we've tried to assist social care, for example, with the costs of the government's supposed living wage, the increase in costs there, and of course our priority on cleaner and greener, that I think we can now take forward with the Scrutiny Committee and hopefully make some good suggestions to Council about how we can help that service area. Neighbourhood service is a service area that's borne the brunt of many cuts over the last 5 years, and they've really, I think it's a credit to the department that they've managed to keep things going whilst their resources have been restrained. I think it's right that now we've got that corporate plan priority that we continue the decision made last year to invest an extra £250,000 in cleaning and greening, and that we look what else we can do working with that department to really help bring up the state of the physical state of the borough. So I look forward to taking those forward with scrutiny. It's also worth noting that this council, this budget, also includes provision for the living wage. We'll be bringing a report to council at the end of the month that shows how we're going to implement that. I think that's key because I believe that any improvements in service provision can only come with us working in partnership with our staff, with us valuing the work that they do and working with them to improve services. The prevention and early intervention aspects that you mentioned of the budget I think are important too, both in terms of looking to the longer term, of trying to deal with the increasing demand that's coming on our services. The more we can intervene early and intervene in a preventative way, we both have a financial benefit of reducing demand, hopefully, but also there's a human benefit there of stepping in to help people earlier and improving people's lives. So I think that's the right agenda to take forward as well. I welcome the joint scrutiny meetings that are coming up towards the end of the month. I think that's an approach last year that was really welcomed by members right across the council from all parties and none. They appreciated the way they got to look at things in more depth, to speak with officers and members and to ask questions, as opposed to just having an adversarial sort of session with lots of set-piece speeches. I think that's a good development in our scrutiny, and I think that's something that we should take forward. So I welcome that approach later in the month, and I look forward to listening to what members have to say in that scrutiny session. Any other members have any points to make?
I'd like to make one comment on the library situation. I'm eternally grateful that we've been able to take a decision to avoid taking what might have been considered a precipitous step in terms of rationalising library provision. I think library provision is a signal of a civilised society, and as far as it's humanly possible, we should protect it. The notion of taking a long-term decision on what to do with libraries is welcome as well, because it perhaps allows us time to think more clearly about what can be done in order to avoid having to return to this kind of situation on an annual basis. So I hope we're going to use the time available now wisely and try and rationalise how we look and how we deal with library provision, because, as I've said, I believe it is absolutely important, vital, that we keep hold of a library provision that is worthy of the title, worthy of the name, and find something in terms of a lasting recipe for success going forward.
Yeah, I'd just like to, you've referenced it in your speech. I'd just like to welcome the renewed commitment to the £500,000 to prevention and early intervention. I'm strongly of the belief that councils are best placed to provide preventative services. We're in touch with our people. We keep people out of hospitals. We keep people in their homes. We upskill people to get into employment that they want to be in. So this will help towards that, and I think that your comparison with England, I'd like to, it's my personal belief that the stress on the NHS in England is very much linked with the cuts to councils and preventative services in England, because, it stands to reason. We keep people out of hospitals, we keep families and communities resilient. So if you take away those services, it's going to lead to greater demand everywhere, and that is the logic behind investing and to reconfigure the way we do things. So I'm very pleased that we're renewing this commitment, because it's going to be important going forward, because the pressures of austerity, as it would seem, and with Brexit on the horizon, aren't going to help things at all. So we need to be taking action to help our council become more resilient, and then therefore our communities.
I want to comment on the libraries, because in my last role I had a little chance to get about, but last Friday I went and spent some time in Cwmbran Library. It's a real pleasure to be in there. The atmosphere in there is absolutely superb. Every desk used. Lots of people taking their own computers in there as well. A really thriving library, and a lovely, warm, pleasant environment for people to sit and learn. Excellent. I think we made the right decision on that one.
Yeah, can I just make the comment that I certainly welcome the proposed allocations to both our greening and cleaning and also to our highways infrastructure. Probably the areas where we get the most complaints from both members and from members of the public. So I think it's a move in the right direction. I will say this on highways and infrastructure: it isn't enough, it'll never be enough, but at least it's a move in the right direction, I think. And so thank you for that.
Yeah, could I also support everything that's been said about the way the officers have handled the budget, and the news that the library proposals are being withheld till further notice is certainly good news. Now, as Bob has just said about he went into the library in Cwmbran, Now, all our libraries are really well used, but the Cwmbran one is especially well used because of the size of it and the amount of groups that use it. Now, I've been a member of the libraries ever since I was in school, and to me, it's the cheapest form of education you could ever have, is a library service. So, you know, the outcry from the public is certainly not unexpected, you know, because the library service is very, very well valued. In past years, we've had to dispense with the mobile library service because that was a cost-cutting measure that had to be taken. We had to close the library in Abersychan. That was another cost-cutting measure. We've also, in both Blanavon and Cwmbran, combined the use of those buildings with customer care and what else. There's little more that can be done in cost-cutting of libraries. So over the next 12 months, there really needs to be a deep thinking about how can, because libraries are not just libraries, they're resource centres in every stretch of the imagination. So we've got to really think hard how the libraries can be protected, whether it's by involving them more in education, I don't know, you know, because the education budget is always protected as best as possible. So, but the public have shown us how much they value libraries, and we got to do our utmost to protect them. David was dead right in what he just said about in England, you know, how social care have been practically annihilated, and the knock-on effect that is having in hospitals. It isn't very long ago, David Cameron, when he was Prime Minister, was crowing about the state of the NHS in Wales as compared to in England. It's pretty enlightening to see what the true state of it is in England as compared to in Wales. I know it's not perfect in Wales, but it's certainly a lot better in Wales than it is in England, because councils are protecting the social care as much as possible in Wales. Yes.
Right, if I can move to the recommendations in the report then. And they're on page 22. So if I can move those recommendations. I've got a seconder? And all in favour? Right, that's great, that's carried. Thank you, Nigel. Right, on to agenda item 8 then, which is the appointment of the main contractor for Torvine Post-16 Centre.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, members. Yes, the report is for the appointment of main contractor for the delivery of the Post-16 Centre in Torvine. If I could take members briefly through the report. Section 2 details the purpose, which is to appoint the contractor and also to allow the early release of £300,000 worth of authority funding to allow us to maintain programme prior to the ministerial decision on the future of post-16 education in Torvine. If I take members briefly through the report then, excuse me a moment. Section 4 details the background of how we've developed education within Torvine post-16. If I take you to the issues and findings section, we're detailing there how we've appointed the contractor via a cost-quality scoring mechanism. If I can take members briefly then to section 5.9, that's where we detail out the relative scores of the contractors who've submitted bona fide bids. Taking members to the risks section, we detail out there the need to commence work to maintain programme to deliver post-16 education subject to ministerial decision, and also that the risk is of delivery is based on the ministerial decision that will be due in due course this year. Excuse me. If I just note then in measures of success 10.2, that the completion of the project will benefit the Council's corporate priority of raising educational attainment. So straight to recommendations, members, that we look to award the contract based on receipt of Welsh Government funding in the full value, but initially allow early release of authority funding of £300,000 to enable us to make partial award to continue the works to enable us to maintain programme for delivery of post-16. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Any members want to ask any questions or make a contribution? Right, can I move the recommendations on page 31 then? I've got a seconder. And all in favour? Thank you very much. Agenda item 9, which is Cross Killyog School, reducing the 11-16 capacity to 1,200 pupil places. Bring in Dermot.
Good morning, Leader and Cabinet. Looking at the right page on the screen. Okay. Thank you, Leader. Obviously, the purpose of this report is to report on the outcomes of the recent consultation exercise on the proposal to reduce the 11-16 capacity of Cross Killyog School to 1,200 pupils, and to seek permission then to go forward with the publication of a statutory notice in relation to the above-mentioned school. Why are we doing this? As part of the process of securing funding for the rebuild of Cross Killyog School, we're clearly required to look at what the needs of that school currently are and where the catchment is in terms of the demand from catchment and so on. So as part of that analysis, it was very clear that a capacity of 1,200 would be more than sufficient to meet the future demand in the area. And albeit the building would need initially to cope with more once those changes take effect. Reducing the school's capacity from September 2018, therefore, if this is agreed, won't affect the current learners. It will affect subsequent cohorts who come in as we reduce the admissions number from 274 per annum down to 240. So that would move the school from a 9-form entry to an 8-form entry. And the proposal to reduce the capacity obviously doesn't affect the other consultation that we'll talk about in the next paper. We had, I think it was 330 letters that went down when we had 8 responses. And those 330 letters were in addition to the statutory consultation list, which is in your papers. If we don't proceed, there are a couple of risks, and those are in section 8.1, which really relate to our ability to maintain, but we've reached our target in terms of surplus places. If we don't reduce numbers going forward, then that would put that requirement to remove surplus places at risk, and would also impact on the available budget for the new school build, which we're now in the middle of designing with the team in the school. So members, that's really it in a nutshell, and obviously the consultation responses are in the bundle, and those have been in the members' room for some time as well. So I stop there, Leader, and just ask if there are any questions.
There's little that I can add to the technical detail that's just been expressed. I'm more concerned about the risks of not doing this and the likely impact on the new build school. And for that reason, and if only for that reason, I think we should roundly support this. It's part of the whole process that's been in train for some time, that all members have agreed with in terms of the 21st Century Schools programme. This slots into that particular format properly and clearly, and I commend it. I think if you read the report, you will draw the same conclusion. If you look at the responses to the consultation process, you'll draw a similar kind of conclusion, I'm sure. So without further ado, I commend it, and I hope everybody else around the table will follow suit.
Okay. Anyone else want to contribute? Well, I'd just like to echo the contribution made by my colleague Dave Yole there, really. I think this is it can seem very dry and academic, but it's part, effectively, of a £30 million investment in a brand new school building for a large number of learners in our borough, and I think that's something that we should welcome. I welcome the recognition that this is something that needs to be phased in over time, as opposed to done in one go. But I think this is a positive pathway for that school, and something that we'll, hopefully look back on with a newly built school in several years' time, and feel that we've done the right thing. So on that basis, I can move the recommendations in the report. I've got a seconder, and everyone in favour? That's great. That's carried. Thank you very much. Straight on to agenda item 10 then, which is the review of post-16 education.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Obviously, in terms of the purpose of this report, is to establish a new English medium, I repeat that, English medium sixth form centre, replacing all current English medium sixth form provision in Torvine. So YGG, as called given conclude, is not impacted by this proposal. And then making a regulated alteration to Crossakilliog School, Cambran High School, and St Albans Roman Catholic High School by ending sixth form provision. Clearly, what we're also asking you to consider then is the publication of the statutory notices that will allow us to proceed, which I should say also then triggers another consultation period as well. As Cabinet remembered, the proposals to build a new English medium £20 million centre in Cambran. The online business case was submitted to Welsh Government back in September 16, and it was approved in November 16, and the Council now has been invited to submit the full business case. We think that the investment, if it goes ahead, in the site and buildings will take up to 2 years to complete following the design phase, and we still are looking to have turnkey on the 1st of September 2019. So, in terms of the consultation itself, that ran from Friday the 11th of November to Friday the 23rd of December 2016. You've had all the consultation responses in the members' library for some time, and as usual, within 13 weeks of the end of the consultation period, allowed for responses, we must issue a consultation report, and that's what's attached in the document today. The risks in terms of this particular proposal, clearly, it's probably worth just going through those in a little bit of detail, and then again, because there were quite a lot of responses to this consultation, Leader, it might be worth pausing after I go through the risks and just maybe looking at some of those and asking for questions. But the risks in terms of, to us at the moment, in terms of this proposal, uncertainty about policy and funding, which could lead to confusion within the project or stakeholders about what direction the transformation project is going in. There's a lot of work to be done after this decision is taken today, and we'll obviously try to endeavour to make sure that not only Cabinet and Council but the whole community are kept up to speed with information that we have from Welsh Government, and try to make sure that we remove any of that uncertainty as we can. There's the potential for delay in the go-ahead and funding release at each stage, which is common to these sorts of projects. In this case, if there are objections to the closure during the statutory period, then those will go to the Welsh Government Minister, the Cabinet Secretary, and that time frame is obviously beyond our control, but we'll try to minimise that by working closely with colleagues in Welsh Government to make sure they have all the information they need. Funding available is not sufficient to deliver the project. It's one of those things in terms of a £30 million project, we always have to manage the budget really carefully, and we're confident that we're on track and will deliver what we need to within 20 million, I said 30 million now. I didn't just increase the cost by 10 million. 20 million, we'll obviously work very closely with everyone to make sure we bring that in on budget. No one said anything. That was a there was a 10 million extra cheque there I nearly got. And clearly there's always the issue about, in terms of new build, making sure it's fit for purpose and we get what we need to deliver sixth form education. So those are pretty standard risks, but clearly there's something that we work very closely with everyone across the council and beyond to make sure that we mitigate. So there were over 13,000 letters sent out on this one, so we're talking about a very significant consultation. That was in addition to the statutory consultation list, which is there in the appendices. We had 142 responses. Unusually, and I think this is noteworthy, when we talk about closing something down, we tend to get lots of responses from people who would like us not to do that. On this occasion, about half, 50-50 sort of percentage ratio of responses were quite positive, which is unusual. But again, we only had 142 responses out of quite a significant consultation. Some schools didn't respond as well, which I think is noteworthy too. But if I pause there, there's quite an extensive consultation document with a series of questions. Clearly, we've tried to answer all of the queries that were raised excuse me, in the consultation document, but I'll pause there and ask if there's any comment or questions.
Any questions before we go through the document as a whole? If we look in the document itself, I think it's page 76 is where the summary of the responses start to come in, and they're divided into themes. The first of the themes is around educational achievement and performance. And sort of the reassurance that you've given in the report on the educational achievement performance type thing. Do you want to just quickly summarise the thoughts on that?
Obviously I should point out that Eston have also responded and have also concluded that there will be at least as good outcomes. So that's really important to note in terms of the overall response to these. There is an issue about comparing sixth form performance with college performance at the moment, because the way that's recorded and reported isn't the same, something that Welsh Government are currently consulting on. We are confident that the provision made by Colleague Gwent is at least as good as the current outcomes that we're getting from our sixth form colleges. So in short, we aren't concerned that we're going to see a downturn in performance simply because it's going to college provision. And what we've also stressed through the consultation response and in discussion with the public and with staff and with everyone is that the transition process that we need to go through in order to make sure there's a smooth handover will be critical. And that work's already begun to make sure that we look at curriculum design in schools, that's a Key Stage 3 and 4, as well as all the pastoral support and other transition issues that many of the respondents have actually highlighted. So that work's already underway. So we're confident, in short, the provision will be at least as good.
The next section then is on staffing, in which we recognise that the changes will cause concern to some members of staff, but I assume we're going to be working closely with both the college and the trade unions to minimise the disruption on that. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Absolutely, and we've already had a meeting. We've had a couple of meetings actually with the trade unions over the last 2 years. And again, it was rehearsed, I think, this morning at PSJCC, the Consultative Forum, and this will be an issue that we stay close with trade unions and staff on. We know that there will be some change. There is unmistakable, it's unmistakable that there will be the possibility of some redundancies in this, and potentially a significant number of redundancies, because the nature of the funding model going from a school-based local authority employment model to an FE model. Clearly, as Torvine, we have a very good record in terms of supporting staff through change processes. We go through an £800,000 plus change management process every year with our schools. It's quite extensive, and we have a very good track record in redeploying staff and in avoiding compulsory redundancies. So all that experience and all of that learning and all of that close work with trade unions and schools will obviously be, we'll be building on in terms of this process. So all the staff who currently might be at risk, and we won't know those numbers until we get further into the design process and we get beyond really the permission from the Minister, is where we think we'll be able to sit down with the school and say, right, with each of the 3 schools concerned, and look at their staff structures, because that's what we'll need to do and they'll need to do. We're quite confident when we get to that point, we'll be able to build on that experience we had previously and make sure that those staff who are then identified, the college have already confirmed that they will be, the college will give them lots of information about what's available, what the staff structure they're looking to put in place is, and those people will be offered an interview with Colleague Gwent for the posts that come up. And that was the same sort of modus operandi that was in place in Blaenau Gwent when the Learning Campus there was devised. So again, the college have lots of experience of working through a very similar process. That isn't to take away from any change of this scale will cause anxiety, and what we can't do is guarantee that everyone who currently has a role in a sixth form, in one of our sixth forms, will necessarily have a job in the college, but we'll do everything that we possibly can to give people the maximum choice they can have while delivering those high quality outcomes for learners in the new model.
Any further questions or comments on staffing specifically before we move on? So then on page 79, I think it is, the questions then about student continuity and transition, how we're going to make sure this sort of transition is a good one for the young people as well.
Yeah, I think this is where, dare I say it, in some of the contributions, there's a bit of mythology about what happens in FE provision, and a bit of fear coming through in terms of it's going to be different, and later on pastoral support isn't there. So actually, what we've already had, what we've already been doing with the college is looking at how we can demystify some of the experiences that young people can experience and that parents can also sort of engage with. We've had discussions with the diocese. We've had ongoing discussions with the diocese over the last year, and with colleague Gwent. I do mean both dioceses, in that both diocesan reps, about what contribution they can make to the new provision, and to make sure that, while it may not have a distinctive faith character, that we again also look to ensure that College Gwent, which they've already offered, provides a multi-faith service to learners, and also provides an appropriate space in the college, and look at the ethos that the diocese can help contribute in terms of the running of the new provision. So the transition work has already begun. We'll accelerate that. Once again, that statutory decision is made. That will involve curriculum planning, pastoral support planning, looking at the range of provision that's available in schools, and reaching out to the school councils and the schools to make sure that young people are directly involved in that process as well. I don't think there's anything else left out.
Anything to add to that, colleagues? Page 81 is the next sort of major section, which is on choice. So I think that's quite a key issue, and a potential improvement that we can make to the range of subjects and choice that young people have.
Obviously, some of the contributors felt that taking away sixth forms was taking away choice in itself, because you have the choice between sixth forms and FE. Clearly, what we're really focused on is having a sustainable range of provisions of the highest quality and the widest range possible going forward. Challenges to school budgets are clearly putting lots of pressure on schools to be able to offer a range and choice at the moment. And I think lots of schools, all of our schools, are facing challenges already in terms of how we can support them in offering that change. By consolidating all of that provision in one place, we are clear with College Gwent, again, these discussions are already ongoing, that we can have a wider range of choice than is currently available in any individual setting. We won't be able to give all of that detail, again, until a little bit further in the process, but we're quite confident that that range will be expanded. Can we now guarantee that every child who's doing a particular course at the moment will have the exact choice? Probably not, because schools haven't coordinated in Torvine the curriculum offer in the way that we would have liked them to. So there's been quite a significant amount of funding going in from Welsh Government to try and look at the local partnership to actually coordinate work between schools. That isn't something that we've managed particularly effectively in the past. So by, again, consolidating and centralising that provision, that will get removed, and we'll be able to offer a wider coordinated choice across the piece to all learners.
So moving down to page 85, there's a section there on location and access and transport. Could you just sort of summarise the sort of consideration that was given to the location of the new centre?
I think the biggest issue that came through from learners themselves actually was about location. Some in favour of it being in a town centre location. Some quite rightly saying for some it may mean a long travel from where they live, particularly from the north of the borough. We were able to give some assurances around travel times as part of the consultation. Just looking at the bus networks that exist, which actually, if people are currently travelling south to go to college environments, are no better than what they will be if this centre is eventually approved and built. In terms of the town centre location, there's no question that some work needs to be done to the infrastructure in that part of town, particularly around the roundabout. Morrison's roundabout got quite a lot of mentions over the weeks of this consultation, and we're already looking at adjusting the traffic lights, for example, off that roundabout where the bus stop is, as part of the master planning exercise to improve that. But the critical bit really for this centre is it shouldn't be seen as being on the edge of the town. The master planning exercise that we're already well advanced with Welsh Government in terms of the overall use of the site, because we won't need all of the site, is that it should be part of the town. And for that reason, it needs to be considered as a link to the town, and how it's designed, how it's built will very much reflect that. In terms of general location, it's often the case when we bring reorganisation proposals to you, which involve some elements of closure, that we try to put the supply of the provision as close as possible to the demand for the provision. And again, just because of the geography of this county borough, it is a fact that the vast majority of the demand is in the south, and the further north you move it, the more you are inconveniencing people. And that's why the Site 2 in Cwmbran is considered to be the best possible site that we can access.
Yeah, well, I accept the facts about the site. I think it's an excellent site. But I have to express the concerns that you made then about the access out onto the main roads, onto St David's Road particularly. The Morrison roundabout now is chaotic. The number of complaints we get about that is nonsensical. We need to do something about that. Now, to put another access out on the St David's Road is going to be bad. And I think we need to look at that and consider that in great detail when the time comes and the plans are drawn up. Because I don't think it would be appropriate to shove it where it would be intended to put it, between the two roundabouts, because the roundabout's not that far apart. And with another access out of there, of a college, which would be used by other people, I would think, people from Girlings, I would think, would use it, it would be detrimental, I think, to the traffic on St David's Road. So I think that needs to be carefully considered. Can I also just raise the issue about the comments within the report? There's a number of comments there about St Albans School. I'm just wondering what the consequences are, the detrimental consequences about taking sixth form college out of there on the school's budget and financial management. Maybe you can explain that to me.
Obviously, in terms of, it's hard to know how to answer that question. Obviously, most of our secondary schools at the moment are facing some tough decisions about their overall budget and are facing some difficulty. That's the reality, I think, across the region. St Albans is no different from that. So we work very closely with the school in terms of how we can support them to effectively manage their medium-term financial plan. Taking away the sixth form, in effect, would take out the exact funding that they need. They're not going to lose, per se, for something from 11 to 16 because we're removing the sixth form. And obviously any transitional change costs that would be associated with the removal of the sixth form that the local authority will support and manage with the school, as long as the school follow the advice that we give, which they tend to do. Because we manage those processes very closely, then we will bear those costs. So overall, there shouldn't be an impact directly on the budget. There will be some concerns about, if we don't have a sixth form, will that attract the number of pupils coming into the 11 to 16 component of the school? And that will be an issue, I think, for all of the schools, because they sometimes feel that the sixth form is what draws pupils in. And in Crossy's case, for example, and in most of our schools, they've got something like 300-400 pupils coming in from out of catchment. So that can be a concern. Now, there's not much we can really do about that at the moment, and obviously, we're working very closely with the diocese on this proposal and other proposals that they've brought forward themselves, which we think might mitigate, if those come to fruition, might mitigate any negative impact that this might bring about. So, at this point, all I can say is we work very closely with all of the schools. We've got a 3-year financial plan in place for all of our schools. We're having the discussions about the potential impact of this, and we'll continue to support schools to make sure that they continue to be successful, whatever the footprint they have is going forward.
Yeah, John makes a good point regarding the safety aspects on accident onto the road. We've got a zebra crossing right by the roundabout now, and it's a wonder to me there hasn't been nobody killed on that crossing. Now, what's the projected pupil numbers, which will give an indication how big this place is going to be?
The proposal sees some growth of pupil numbers over time, but roughly speaking, we're talking between 1,000 and 1,100. But what people need to understand is that this facility will not run in the same way that a school runs. So in a school, tends to be a lot of activity at 2 points in a day, the beginning of the day and the end of the day. Sixth form centres operate in a different way. The flow of people in and out of buildings is much more frequent and therefore levels out. But I just want to assure members that as part of the planning for this, we have to consider the impact on highways. It was already being considered anyway because of the issues that you mentioned, concerns about that roundabout, concerns about the siting of the crossing. We're piggybacking that, if you like, simply because what we want to do could have further impact, and we need to make sure that that's mitigated as far as it can possibly be mitigated, to the point that it's deemed to be safe enough to be allowed under planning laws. So we've got that process. The big issue, I suppose, with a centre of this sort, particularly given the age group that we're talking about, is it's possible that there will be more car users. We're not putting a lot of car parking on the site. One of the key attractions to putting this centre where it is the access to public transport. So we're meeting the requirements in terms of parking, and certainly in terms of requirement for any disabled users of the site. But we're not building a car park, because quite frankly the money that the council is prepared to invest, and the match that Welsh Government is prepared to invest, shouldn't be put into building a car park. It should be put into building an education institution.
Because we've gone through the question and answer process pretty robustly over there. I'd like to make a few comments, though, about the progress that's been made. And forgive me for going back in history a little bit, but this particular project has been discussed and tried to be moved on over a long, long period of time, 10 years or more. And indeed, as little as 3 years ago, we were still stalled in terms of any kind of progress. In the last couple of years, we've seen an acceleration of the progress, and that's a lot to be said for the people that we've had to deal with. I'd like to say this, that whilst it's long overdue, we should grasp this opportunity to provide what I believe, and I'm sure that others would support the view, is an ideal opportunity to enhance the provision of post-16 education in our remit, in our valley. Lots of talk about, over the last few years, about the divide between the north and the south. At a meeting yesterday, I made the comment that it isn't necessarily so much a division between north and south in terms of post-16 provision, but for far too long it's been a division, if you like, between Cwmbran and everywhere else in the borough. And I think this particular project, whilst it's centred in Cwmbran, ironically, does a lot to square that particular circle. Moving on to travel, because it is connected, John Tushenham talked a bit about travelling and how accessible that was. There's a bus route from Blanavon down to Cwmbran that operates on a 10-minute cycle, and the same going back in the other direction. Because people have said to me that what's the point of trying to deal with issues of people in the very, very north of the borough when they have to travel all the way down to Cwmbran. Well, it's a lot easier to get on a bus every 10 minutes from Blanavon down to Cwmbran, one bus ride, than to get on a bus to Pontypool and then from Pontypool over to Crosskeys or Ebbw Vale. And that's clearly the better option of straightforward travel. The big mover for me is the curriculum choice that's on offer at the new institution. I hear take the point that Dermot made about the transition process. There will be some hiccups there. But once the place is up and running and established, then the curriculum choice itself will kick in, and there will be a wider, deeper element of choice in that respect. 30 years ago, 35 years ago, there was a sixth form college instituted at Blandare Roadside. The amount of A-levels that were on offer there was tremendous, significantly more than anybody ever envisaged, and all sorts of weird and wonderful A-levels were on offer. Lots of people from Cwmbran, in fact one of the biggest cohorts of people to come to that sixth form centre were from Cwmbran. And the difference between the Cwmbran element and the Pontypool element was that Pontypool had no choice, because part of the rationale behind the sixth form college of Blandare Road was the denuding of the A-level provision at three of the existing grammar schools, Westmont, the Girls' County School and Abersycon. They came there quite enthusiastically, but there was no alternative for them, because that was a decision made by the Old Gwent Education Authority. However, when you compare and contrast that to the cohort of people coming from Cwmbran, the Cwmbran people that came to the college came out of choice, because the curriculum on offer there was significantly more attractive. The one thing that Blandare Road didn't have going for it was its position in its geographical location. It was incredibly difficult to access in the summer. In the winter, it was almost impenetrable. But the success rate of that curriculum-based sixth form provision there was fantastic, second to none, compared more than favourably with every other sixth form provider in the Torfaen remit. Imagine, if you like, that kind of potential for success driven by that kind of curriculum, if it's placed in a flatland that is significantly more accessible, and it is deliberately constructed and built with close proximity of rail links, bus links, and a commercial hub like Cwmbran. It has everything going for it. There are likely to be some risks, there are likely to be some disadvantages, and some people may very well be unlucky. But what we can do is we can't promise that everybody is going to be fitted up with a job as a consequence of the transition from sixth forms in some of our schools to the post-16 institution. But what we can promise is that we will work very, very clearly and very, very robustly with the Coleg Gwent staff, led by Guy Lacey, who has played a significant role, a significant part in progress in this particular project. We will work very, very closely and robustly with those to make sure that as far as it's humanly possible, we will look at ways and means of smoothing this transition and getting the best kind of results out of it. I commend it. I can't think of a better project. It's long overdue. I think it will be successful, and once it's embedded, this will take off, and it will improve the condition of our post-16 education in Torfaen like you wouldn't believe.
Well said. Bob?
Yeah. I think Dave said it all, actually. I support everything he said, and there has been a lot of work have been done over the last 3 years by the Chief Executive, Dave, and the officers, and all sorts of other people. On the question of location, I don't believe you could have a better location. I don't know of anywhere where I think it could be put in Cwmbran, which is better than the current location it's got. Now, if there's an issue about crossing that road, then there's adequate space between the parking spaces in Cwmbran and Llantarnam Grange to make access in there. I think it'll give a vibrance to the borough. I mean, students don't want to be up on the side of the mountain, quite frankly, which is what they were in Pontypool. I think this is an all-round good settlement and a good idea. And I want to congratulate the officers for getting us this far. So I support everything that David Holder said.
Just to sum up, really, I recognise the concerns that have been expressed, and hope we can work to address the points people make and smooth the transition, as my colleague David Old says. But I very much agree that the status quo is untenable, and I am drawn to the positives of this proposal. That I'd like to echo really what David said, especially. It's a point of equity for me. For too long there's been a north-south divide, and provisional has been seen as unequal. Council recognised this years ago and decided on a tertiary route to solving this, and I welcome the progress that we now seem to be being made. This also reflects Welsh Government policy, which is important not just because they're the Welsh Government, but also because we need their money for any solution. So you know, we need to work closely with them as well as with colleague Gwen. The location points have been made really that I want to echo about the accessibility. Bus routes all going into the bus station in Cwmbran, just across the road from where the centre would be, make this a very accessible place from all parts of the borough. I think it would have been the wrong thing to do for us to go for a location further north just for the symbolism of that, when it's actually harder to get there than other places. You know, this may be further south, but it's actually easier for people in the north to get to. I also think if I was a 16-year-old, it's where I would want to be educated, sort of amongst the town centre with all the opportunities that offers, and really sort of bring in the education and the commercial heart of Cwmbran together. I think that's a good thing. In terms of provision, I'm drawn to the positive Estyn response. I think the opportunity for a wider syllabus that recognises the opportunity that our people, we can help them exploit in the modern economy. That can only be a good thing. The wider range of things that can be offered for young people. Also, the increased moulding together of the more vocational academic subjects. We often talk about sort of parity of esteem in those terms. I think that's important, that we can do anything as part of this project to help that. And also, I don't think we should underestimate the impact of a new state-of-the-art facility for our young people. I think they deserve that. The facilities, especially at that age, can be vital in terms of IT and other facilities for courses. I think that's something that shouldn't be overlooked in this. So I welcome that. I think we've discussed quite thoroughly the issues about staffing and about transition, and I think that's something that we need to continue to work with the trade unions and with colleague Gwent on. But I'm confident that we can, doing that sensitively and intelligently, we can begin to address some of those issues. So I very much welcome this report, and I'd like to move the recommendations. Everyone in favour? None against? Right, so that's passed then. Thank you very much for your work on this report. And that closes the meeting, I believe. Thanks, everyone.